Hey, and welcome back. In the last episode, we were looking at selecting objects, and we've already covered how you move around in the viewport. So right now, what we're going to do is talk about how do you move objects and how do you rotate them. So in 3D, the way I like to really think about these things as real-world objects. So we have a box, right, a cube, and I'm going to select this object. I'm going to select this one. I'm going to delete it, and I hit the delete key. That's how you delete an object. Pretty easy. Just so we know, as we're going over basics, if you do something and you didn't like it, you can undo. Apple Z. On the PC, it's probably like Control Z or something like that. I'm not sure. But I am going to delete that. That cube was looking at me funny. I didn't like that cube. I had to get rid of it. So to select things right next to, so to move things, we've got this little thing called the Move tool. And it's right next to select. And you'll honestly be going back and forth. Oh no, you're going to be using these two things a lot. So with the Move tool, what it'll allow you to do is to move the object. I'm sorry, that took a second for me to get that out. Here you can move things on one axis. So if you grab these arrows, it only moves in that direction. I'm not going to go over Cartesian right now. It's maybe a little bit overwhelming for some people to start it off. Moving this axis, side to side, left and right, however you want to call it for now. We will go over the terminology for what these are called eventually. And this is up and down. So you grab those arrows and they move along only those one axes. It's a very precise way of moving something. Like I want to move like this way, that way. But what it is, it's a little bit like of a pain in the butt sometimes because you want to move in more than one axis at a time. You can grab this little right angle and now you're moving along this axis. So you can tell a little bit easier here. It's like sliding it around the floor. And this is like sliding it along a wall. If there was an imaginary wall there. Same with this one. So that's the Move tool. Now, the thing about the Move tool that I want to make clear here is that if you click and drag, it'll just start moving it around. So that's kind of weird. I don't really use this. I think this is called tweak mode. I don't do that. So the thing is also is if you go to selection mode, I hit 0 and I box select, you also get move controls here. So that can be a little bit confusing. You think you're in the Move tool or you think you're in the select tool. Sometimes it's a little bit confusing which one you're in because you can move objects in either mode. Okay, so that's how we move objects. The next thing is if you go to this one, we're going to skip scale because scale, we'll come back to it in a little bit. You can select an object and what this is going to do is this is rotate. So rotates these arrows here. It looks like a recycle sign. And again, if you grab the little handle, this is a gizmo here, and you rotate and you go like this, it'll rotate on one axis. Same here. This will rotate it on only this axis, and this will rotate it only on that axis. If you grab it in between, you kind of free rotate it, and it's it's a little bit bananas, a little bit tricky to use. Though sometimes it's useful. Sometimes this is a little bit more intuitive. It's kind of like if you grabbed it and physically started like spinning it on its own. That's what's happening here. So the last thing before we wrap it up, and I guess I'll go look at scale. Scale's the same thing. Scale. Well, this is a box. So we'll deal with scale later. Scale's a little bit different. So let's look at, before we go, when you move these things around, so the position of the objects, when you're using the Move tool, you'll see them reflected in two places. You'll see them down here. So I'm in feet. So what I can do is if I add these things, if I put these things all to 0, we move this cube back to where it started. And I'm going to unrotate everything as well. So that's where it started, and then as we moved it, you can see that on X it's moved a couple feet this way, it's moved a couple feet this way, and I moved it a couple feet up. So it shows up there, and it also shows up now under attributes. So if there's a couple different tabs here, but if you go to coordinates, under XYZ, it's the same as this position here. Now these do get different sometimes, depending on what's going on. But just know that you can enter manually in things right there, which is important. It's like, if you're building a room and you know that there's a cube that's 10 feet in the air, now it's 10 feet in the air. Pretty important to be able to do that. Same thing with rotation. I'm hitting R to get to rotate. I can rotate you exactly 90 degrees, exactly 45 degrees. Sometimes that's really important. And the last thing about rotate, if you want to do like what's called discrete rotations or incremental rotations, if you hold shift, you start rotating and you hold shift, it will snap to every 10 degrees, which is somewhat helpful, but I do a lot of 45 degrees rotation, so it's not that helpful for me. Maybe there's a way to snap it every 5, I don't know. So that is like the bread and butter of Cinema 4D as far as like the basics, okay? So we looked at going around the viewport, we looked at selecting objects, and we looked at moving and rotating and some kind of scaling them. So to wrap this up, I'm going to just show you a quick demo. I'm hitting 0. We're just going to talk through what I'm doing. I'm going to 0 this out so that it's not rotated at all. So I'm going to select this object, and I'm in selection mode. And I'm going to hold Control and make another one, okay? Then I'm going to hold Control and make another one. Still in selection mode. So you can do a lot from here. You can select things, you can move them, and you can make new ones. You'll see over here, cube 1, cube dot 1, and cube dot 2. It's auto-naming them. That's what's going on. So next thing here, you want to name these. Let's call this cube 1. Say like you want to just do your own naming system. You want to name it Joe, Curly, and I forgot the Three Stooges names just now. Cube 3. That's not how you spell cube. That's how you rename things. Very important to keep on top of the naming. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this one and I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to go to the rotate tool and I'm going to go like this. I'm going to rotate you as well. I'm going to rotate you. So I'm just making some like random designs here. I'm going to go back to the select tool and I like these. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select all of them. I've selected all 3. I'm holding Control again. And I've made another copy of those. And now with all 3 of those selected, I'm going to rotate them. So this is not going anywhere. I'm just showing you how to like kind of freestyle move things around because this gets to be kind of important and I just want to give you some perspective on like, what this process actually looks like to make a bunch of cubes that look like this. So again, if you're new to Cinema 4D and you're new to 3D in general, these last couple of videos, that should be enough to get started. Really, before you even hop into Cinema Designer, before you launch it, get familiar with these things. Get around the viewport, holding Alt, clicking around, practice selecting things 0 and 9, practice moving and rotating, which is actually what, like, I think E is move, R is rotate. You can click the buttons up there, and then hold Control and move something, and you're making a copy of it. Practice that. Really get comfortable with it. Look at the objects as they show up in the outliner. Or I'm sorry, that's Outliner's Maya. In the objects menu or panel, delete them all. You don't have to worry about breaking anything in Cinema 4D. You made some stuff, you can make it again really quickly. This is all free, it's virtual, don't get attached to anything. I don't like those cubes, I deleted them, and I made a new cube. That easy. So that's gonna wrap it up for this intro series to Cinema 4D. After this, we're gonna start looking at actual Cinema Designer stuff and doing some real fun cinematography design. So I'll see you guys on the next episode.